listing some of the main international developments which constituted and precipitated the crisis. Dr. Shankaracharya will talk about the Indian policy response and some of the larger macro issues.
Since we have then 1 hour and 5 minutes for what we cannot listen.
We'll speak on how at a micro level an enterprise is affected by the crisis and responds to it. All of us are hopefully at the fag end of this global crisis. Now we can actually think about lessons learned. Hopefully, I said hopefully, it is not yet confirmed that we are out of the boat at yet.
Talk about the lessons learned.
So one major lesson learned is that being a good kid on the block is not enough. You are well behaved. You do everything you are being told is the right thing to do. You have done your lessons. You do everything to achieve. But still, you might end up in deep trouble for no fault of yours. This is one consequence of global interdependence. A financial crisis, which is not of your own doing, finds its way to your bottom line, affecting your demand, your markets, your capital costs, your everything. A global epidemic finds its way to your shores for no fault of yours and disrupts your business, your health system, government finances, anything. A computer virus finds its way through the global information highway and can mess up your information systems. So this is the cost, the downside of globalization. But of course, the opportunities, gains to be made outweigh by far these threats and these costs. And at the same time, as you said, we are trying to draw lessons. The G20 has also tried to draw some serious lessons as to what can be done. What we can say at the outset, from the outside, is that the very fact that the largest economies of the world have found it necessary to rope in the larger emerging markets such as India and China into a policy-making regulatory forum is that they also recognize that global finance and the larger forces of globalization cannot be controlled from any single center or any pole of the larger global economy. Unless there is coordinated regulation and coordinated response, we are not able to control this beast called globalization. This much is clear to one and all. Now, there are issues about exit, about coordinating your exit, coordinating financial regulation. There are problems about the financialization of commodity markets. Oil prices shooting through the roof, although the physical demand for oil no way justifies the price that oil commands right now. We have this strange situation where every single asset in sight is going through the roof. Normally, gold prices go up when there is risk and other assets are down. But now, all assets, including gold, real estate, securities, bonds, everything is going up. There is too much of money sloshing around the system. Again, a country like India, which again hasn't mismanaged finances as sharply as many other countries have, might bear the brunt of policy errors on the other side. Now, Indians have always been criticized for being very wise and prescriptive and advocating reform by various other agencies, while themselves not doing anything much, including at Copenhagen. But at least in this global financial crisis, the reality is that we are not a major player in either building up the large surpluses which are to be deployed, or in borrowing on a very large scale, as others have. But still, India will find itself being affected by this. Now let us see what lessons we can hope to learn from the crisis that is blowing over and has been tackled in various different ways. Now I'll request Dr. Raju Kumar to pick up this.
Thanks, Arun. Thanks a lot. A great pleasure being here. And I must compliment all of you at the end of the long day to still see so many people up with eyes open, and this is amazing actually. So what we thought was that we'll have very short initial presentations, and then we will really try and make it much more interactive, because each one of us has a different take on what we want to learn or what we should learn. I mean, the crisis has been going on for such a long time that I'm sure each one has drawn his own lessons from this. So I don't want to be sound sort of boring and repetitive. The second thing is that I noticed on the program that you've got a lot of focus on India, and the sort of program is very, very, and as I suppose as it should be, India-centric. But I will want to move out of there, because I think we'll come back to those in the questions, and let's try and see kind of a more global picture, as it were, about what the what the crisis has done to us, what we have in the future, what we need to do to go back to a situation where we get right through the crisis in the coming years. I think the first most important thing that Arun already mentioned is that any notion of anybody having decoupled from the global economy is just the myth, is a non-starter. All of us are very much coupled now. Any idea of self-reliance or doing it on your own, etc., is a non-starter. And yet at the same time, I notice more and more that because of what's happened to the people, the way they've been affected by the crisis and so on, and the fact that the financial intermediation, the global financial intermediation would not be the same. There'll be greater regulation. There'll be lesser freedoms to the banks to do what they were doing. It's bound to happen that there will be some greater emphasis on national markets, national flows, and sort of national effort to grow. But I hope what it does not lead to, I mean that's very well, but what it does not lead to is any sense of growing protectionism, because that's something that's a real danger. Because as the advanced economies gets into a situation that employment, which is a lagging variable, as we know, takes much longer to get back onto the same levels, or get increasing unemployment. There will be huge political pressure. I can see that in most advanced economies and some emerging economies, to try and say that, look, we want to save our jobs, and therefore let our markets be for our boys and for our girls and not for outsiders. And that's a real danger that I think we need to work very closely together. And I think one of the most important items on the G20 agenda would be that. And that's one area where you will have to get everybody who's sort of large economy, whether advanced or emerging, together. So that, and this is one action which might be much more difficult to coordinate. As somebody said, it was easier to coordinate the stimulus. It will be much more difficult, far more difficult to coordinate the exit from the crisis. And this will be one of the areas where I think, because what happened is that despite all the pledges that everybody took in Washington in November 2008, that we will not have protectionism, etc., the World Bank study did show that 19 out of the 23 member countries of the G20 took some protectionist measure or the other in the next 6 months itself. So that's one, and why I'm saying that is that is probably at the heart, the issue would be probably at the heart of what we very often refer to as global imbalances, which is that some countries built up huge surpluses like China and Germany and were export dependent, and while the others had huge current account deficits like the US and so on. Now these global imbalances cannot arise, cannot exist. Now there are two ways for it. One, of course, that the export-oriented economies, export-dependent economies, will necessarily have to switch from extreme export dependence to increasing the share of domestic consumption. But it's not something that they can do overnight. It's not that China, who's where I think the net exports contribute, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere 8 to 10% of the GDP, today, and they have this huge surpluses that vis-a-vis. So they can't just simply switch over. They should. They were trying to. They've declared their intentions to, or Germany for that matter. But it's not going to happen overnight. So for a smooth transition to take place, the doors of the other countries, the importers, importing countries, etc., must remain open so that this transition is facilitated. And we now know that that complete dependence on external demand, and that's one of the lessons. I will not take you forward, but here the lesson that I draw for India is actually just the reverse, which is that you can't also say that you will depend only on domestic demand and hope to grow and achieve the rates of growth that you want to get to. In this regard, the one thing that I want to emphasize is that as this global macroeconomic imbalances already begin to correct themselves, and they're beginning to do so, because the US savings are beginning to rise again, especially the household savings, they will leave a huge gap in global aggregate demand, right? Because and some people have estimated that, Marty Feldstein and others, that it could be between $800 billion to $1 trillion. Basically, that there will be a demand shrinkage because the US households, having burned their fingers, now are going to consume much less and are going to be sort of saving more and improving their balance sheets. So the issue arises for us as to where this demand will going to come from if the global economy is going to keep up to the same 3.5% rate of growth which it did for the last 10-15 years. Now, one answer would surely be, sorry, that will not happen. In fact, let's all, and as I think Shankar would sort of emphasize that, let's all get used to the fact of a slower growing economy. But that won't be good for emerging economies like India and others who have to grow much faster to tackle the challenges of their own, the domestic challenges, the poverty, etc. So the issue is, how would you bring global demand back to other levels? And here, as I said, one source would be the switch from external to domestic demand, domestic consumption like China and Germany. But the other which I want to emphasize today is the role of regional public goods and the demand for regional public goods, which is the infrastructure, the connectivity, the power grid, and this is Asia that I'm referring to. Asian infrastructure is hugely underdeveloped at the moment compared to Europe and compared to North America. Now, this infrastructure that you're talking about, whether it's it's, as I said, it's power, telecom, roads, ports, airports, etc. All of that. Some people have estimated that at $5 trillion worth, and so on in the next 10 years. I think that's one area where we can actually, if we work together, we can hugely raise the demand level. All the Asian savings that we are generating, rather than round-tripping across America back to us, can be consumed here. I've been there for a great supporter and a votary of setting up the Asian Investment Bank on the same line as European Investment Bank, which the UNSCAP has a whole proposal for. I think we can discuss that further. My last point here about, again, emphasizing the role of regional demand is for India to actually give much greater attention to South Asian public goods and South Asian regional integration. India is 83% of the South Asian economy, and I think the region between Kabul to Yangon needs huge amount of infrastructure development, and I think this is where India can sort of collaborate, can actually cooperate with all the members of SAARC countries and invite the multilateral development banks and others, private sector, whoever who is willing to come and work in creating the regional infrastructure in South Asia. I think that one thing, as telecom revolution has shown, that if we really do want to achieve higher productivity, higher growth, higher poverty alleviation, etc., infrastructure is the key, and regional infrastructure even more so. There are lots of issues like water, climate change, tourism, which we cannot tackle at a national level. I think and that is where I think India's attitudes towards South Asian regional cooperation, they're undergoing a change, but they need to be far more, as it were, proactive, and not only harp on sort of the negatives here, but see whatever can be done to make this a reality. I think if we do that, then we'll be able to go back to the demand rates growth that we need for our country and for the world as a whole to tackle the problems of poverty and underdevelopment, etc. Let me end by saying that the Asian economic community idea, which is such a good one, it's got a huge amount of political economy problems. And we in India and others need to also look at that, because that's something that if we can take forward, will be again a lesson from the crisis, which is that you can get regional integration to, as it were, buttress the global trends and get much more demand into the system than what we have at the moment. Thanks.
Shankar, would you like to go next?
I think Arun wanted me to let me turn my chair so I don't have my back on this side. Arun wanted me to focus a little more from the Indian perspective. So on that, three or four big thoughts that I would like to put forward to you. First, as all of us know, yes, we were hurt by the global crisis, but we weren't hurt that much, at least in aggregate terms. Individuals and specific areas and specific industries were hurt. If you take the total economy, and if you believe that GDP means something, then the damage was limited. Specifically, that our growth rate came down from around 9% to around 6 to 6.5%. Even in the worst quarter that we've experienced so far, it's never dropped below 5.8% growth. So, why did that happen? Now, there are lots of reasons, but I think one part of the reason was that overall, our macroeconomic policies were reasonably good, partly by design, and I would say also partly by luck. On the design side, I think our monetary policies reacted very quickly after the Lehman crisis to pump up liquidity, drop interest rates, and do all the things that sort of textbooks tell you to do and sensible thoughts tell you to do as well. And that got done by the central bank and the government, with government encouragement, within literally weeks of the Lehman crisis. So I think that was very important. I think we just lost power. You should have mentioned me. I don't know, should I wait or should I carry on?
You have to wait.
Okay. The exchange rate policy, I think, was also appropriately flexible. It had appreciated during the crisis when capital went out, particularly FII money and certain other flows. The exchange rate was allowed to depreciate. The central bank didn't try and defend any unrealistic rate, and that was exactly the right thing to do. The area where I think luck had a great deal to play was on the side of fiscal policy. As you might not know or recall, our overall budget deficit or fiscal deficit, taking the central and state governments together, was roughly in the order of about 5% of GDP by 2007/8, our fiscal year. In 2008-9, the government, for various quasi-populist reasons, in the beginning of that year, well before the crisis came to our shores, pumped up expenditure dramatically. First you had the farm loan waiver, the big wage awards of the Pay Commission, and of course very large subsidies which ballooned in the areas of petroleum, fertilizer and food, essentially because the prices of those things were rocketing internationally, and the government decided to hold key prices at controlled, unchanged levels. So you had, if you like, an expansionary fiscal shock well underway in India before the crisis came and took away a lot of external demand suddenly come around September or so of 2008. And so I think this was a case of luck, that our fiscal stimulus, we didn't call it that, I think the government only found out the word fiscal stimulus later, but fiscal stimulus was well underway, and indeed was timely for reasons which are not entirely good ones, but the outcome was good because it compensated for the sudden drop in export demand that we did experience afterwards. So I think that worked out nicely. But now we are left with the problem of exiting from that fiscal deficit. I'll come to that in a moment. I think the second big thought I'd like invite you to take away is that particularly we in India should not come away with, or we should avoid the lesson that globalization is bad for us. I think that would be completely the wrong lesson to learn, at least as far as the real sector, goods and services is concerned, certainly so. Even if you, I think back to earlier decades when we were a much more inward-looking economy, back in, say, the early 1980s or something like that, I think if you had a comparable external, we not opened up in the last 15 to 18 years to the global economy. The other thought, of course, on this is that during the years when the world economy was booming away nicely, thank you, India benefited in a way that we would not have had if we had kept ourselves close to the external world. So I certainly think that any thought that we should close ourselves in, as Rajiv said, protectionism, the fear of protectionism is not just in the industrial developed countries, although that will certainly be damaging to us, but even in our own country, we should not find this as a reason to go back on trade liberalization and so forth. What about looking to the future? I think the 3 or 4 things I think we do need to watch out for. First, of course, as Rajiv sort of hinted, I think the world economy is probably going to grow a little slower than it did in the 5 years prior to the crisis. And the reason for this is essentially because big economies like the United States, Europe, Japan are going to grow slower for reasons of the overhang of the financial crisis. That doesn't mean that we have no options. I think what it does mean, to me at least, is that we must prioritize our policies to get the best out of world economy, which is growing slower. 3 or 4 things that we need to do. First, the fiscal deficit I mentioned earlier, 10-11% of GDP. We simply can't sustain it if we want to grow at 8-9% a year. We have to come to grips with that slowly, gradually if it's necessary, but certainly we have to. Second, I think there's a danger that with the industrial countries not booming, to put it mildly at the moment, that we might see another surge of capital inflows coming into India. As long as it's coming in the form of direct foreign investment and so on, it should certainly be very welcoming. But some of the hot money that does go in and out, I think we have to be prepared to set some sort of limits, whether you think about a Brazil-type tax on portfolio flows is an issue bears looking into. The main point here is, I think, that we should avoid the sudden appreciation of our currency, which would render our industry and create other tradable sectors uncompetitive. We have in the past gone somewhat cautiously on our move to capital account convertibility. I think that's still the way to go, and perhaps even more so than in the past. And the other area where I would suggest some caution looking ahead, given what the world situation is how rapidly we move on financial liberalization. I think we should adopt much more the Chinese adage of feeling our way across the river with stepping stones. So those are some of my thoughts.
So, Vinita, as a person who ran a company during the crisis and didn't do badly at all, what are your thoughts on how we respond to the crisis?
I think we've got a pretty good perspective from a macroeconomic point of view from my other panel members who've just spoken. I'd just like to take some of that and say, so if you're running a company at a time like this, what are the issues that you're faced with, and therefore what are the critical lessons learned? And to begin with, let me focus on 3 points that I'd like to make. I think the first one, which we realized, and I know a lot of other companies realized that too, was getting a good framework around risk management. Now, when you look at risk management, it is risk to the business, it is risk from a currency point of view. We do know, and I'm sure lots of us have examples of companies that actually lost a great deal of money, not because of business reasons, but because everybody at some point in time believed that the dollar to the rupee convertibility would be, around 40, and everybody went and hedged at very high prices and lost money on that hedging rather than on the business. But risk management is beyond currency hedging as well. I think part of risk management, and that is my second point, is looking at a portfolio of options. What I mean by that is looking at a portfolio of options, not just within the business that you're doing, but across businesses and across countries in which you compete. So let me give you a very specific example to illustrate that. Again, Shankar mentioned that even though our drop was not as significant as what we saw in the global economy, there were some pretty significant sectoral drops. So for example, if you look at the textile industry, that was impacted quite severely. And I'm going to give you an example and relate the third point to this example. And that is that one of the lessons learned, and companies that did that well actually benefited, is what I call, the heading of, becoming more sort of cost competitive or a greater attention to efficiency and effectiveness. So let me take the example of textiles. Here is the Indian textile industry selling whatever cottons we sell at a certain price. And, when this global meltdown happened, suddenly what you saw was a lot of textiles coming in from China at prices that were virtually 50% of the prices of products that were being sold in India. And again, I do know that those companies that went back to the basics of productivity of capital, capital asset management, looking at processes and systems and structures to become more effective and efficient, actually did, relatively speaking, much better than other industries who perhaps didn't have the agility and the swiftness to respond to this crisis in that manner. I think the third thing, which was again a point that was made earlier, is that we might believe that we've got a large domestic market. To that extent, we are insulated from what happens in the global economy. There are 2 or 3 lessons. I think the first lesson is, whilst we may be insulated from a consumer demand perspective, there are a number of other factors that impinge how well businesses work. So again, let me make it very specific for you. There was a time when we went through a liquidity crunch, and that impacted the ability of small and medium-scale businesses to actually either raise capital or be in the market. We found that happening with some of the large retailers who had invested a lot in the retail business. And, there are a few examples of, retail chains that went under because they really did not manage their asset utilization or the productivity of the capital investments that they had made. The second thing we found was that in a lot of industry where, for example, in several industries, manufacturing is outsourced, the ability of the small and medium scale people to get into business, either because funding was not that easily available or the cost of funding was high, was significantly impaired. So it actually slowed down the process of new business creation and therefore new value creation. The last point that I want to make is again a point that has been mentioned earlier, and that is how companies in India can actually be opportunistic and let that work to their advantage. Regional cooperation was a point that was made earlier. I do believe that if you look at the Asian economies, and if you look at the demand side of Asian economies, there is still significant demand. So to give you an example from one of our own businesses, we have a business in the Middle East, and we suddenly found that Dubai or the UAE had lost 17% of its population because industry went under. Equally, there were other markets which were actually doing a lot better. And my insight from working in some of those markets really is that those companies or those businesses that have the agility to respond faster than their competitor in an environment like this actually stand to benefit quite a lot. So I just thought I'd sort of move us from a macro perspective to some very specific micro, things when you're looking at managing a company.
Thank you, Anita. Rajiv raised this point about the Asian surpluses that previously used to be happily dumped on the US being reclaimed back for investment in this area. Roughly out of the $8 trillion worth of foreign exchange reserves before the crisis, close to $6 trillion were deployed in the US itself. Now, a lot of the money came from Asia, Singapore, Taiwan, of course, apart from China's $2 trillion. Is it conceivable that these governments could be persuaded to invest this money in large infrastructure or other industrial enterprises within this fast-growing region? We talk about BRICS. We applaud their growth potential. Is it possible to persuade these surpluses from being invested in safe treasuries to actual production-enhancing infrastructure in these economies?
I think it's possible, yeah, and I think some of that's probably already happening. I mean, some of the surge in capital inflows into Asia that you've seen in the last 7-8 months reflects not just playing the stock market, part of it does, but I think some of it is going into quite exactly the kind of opportunity that you're talking about. On the specific domain of infrastructure, about deploying in some sense or attracting this money into infrastructure, I think there it's from Indian perspective, I would say there the issue is policy and regulatory framework. And until we get those right, and those are subsectors where we get it right, like telecom, we never lack money. Those sectors where we have trouble getting it right, whether it's roads or whether it's power sector or whatever, it's always a struggle. I mean, you see large numbers of $100 billion of investment required. Whether it will happen or not, I think depends crucially on whether we can get the issues like pricing, issues like the whole kind of certainty of what the framework is in the regulatory side, all those sorted out. And if we do, this money will come.
So what can be done to sort of...
Well, I mean, I'd suggest what can be done. I mean, if you had a magic wand and tomorrow in India you said, you will price water at its economic cost, you will price electricity at its economic cost to the final user, you will see money pouring in. If you insist on some peculiar view, well, it's so essential that we must make it free, therefore nobody, of course, produces it, then we have trouble.
Rajiv, Shankar talked about the role that the domestic demand plays in insulating the economy from the global crisis. We have our poverty estimates being revised upwards from 27% to 37%. It might be a different way of looking at the same amount of poverty and giving it a different number. But what is the scope for inclusive growth to actually ensure that a larger and larger number of people are the consuming classes and provide the kind of demand that the Indian economy needs to grow on the strength of domestic demand?
Actually, first to sort of paraphrase Shankar in the way I would want to put it is that, Shankar, we were just so smart that we anticipated the crisis. Right? I mean, that's, because we just got our fiscal stimulus out in February. And I think there is a problem here. So, whatever demand that you've seen now, a large part of it is actually driven by, this government extra expenditure. Basically this huge fiscal stimulus that's come up. And so why I'm saying that is that, very often it is sort of, quite often it's thought that inclusiveness is directly a function of how much money government spends, or transfers income from one sector to the other. I think that's not true. Because if you want really if you want the growth to be inclusive, you've got to, one, the necessary condition for that is, sustaining rapid growth in India. The second one is that you've got to create the conditions in the economy. And I'm not talking about selecting winners at all. Create the conditions in the economy that the labor-intensive industries and sectors and activities are actually encouraged. And that, for example, we've continuously talked about is that you've got to therefore, be in a situation where you encourage and promote your exports, which are very often labor-intensive, etc. And you invest in improving the connectivity of the rural sector to the rest of the economy. Because the poor, and third, which is what I have always been emphasizing for some time now, is that you've got to have much more investment in education than what you have. So inclusion is not something that you achieve by transfer of incomes from one pocket to the other, through a tax regime or through a fiscal subsidy regime, etc. Inclusion is achieved when you really create the necessary conditions for, for employment-intensive growth. And for that, you've got to, as I said, just to repeat, for me, the primary conditions are, one, you've got to have put your education at the heart of it, and especially public education, so that you create the skills and everything else. Two, that you've got to invest in infrastructure, especially rural infrastructure, so that people can move and get the connectivity. And third, that you've got to keep your economy competitive and keep it open to everybody else, rather than try and protect it, so that the investment flows in the sectors where you are competitive and have a competitive advantage, rather than sort of develop under a greenhouse effect, which will be capital intensive and not job creating. Those are my three sort of suggestions for having inclusive growth. I'm sure my panelists will have the others.
Yogita, if inclusive growth actually works and more people enter the consuming classes, you'll be one of the first people to actually feel that path, because you are in the food processing industry, and you actually have a strategy of marketing your food at price points that are affordable to the poorest. So what has been your experience in this particular area? Has the fiscal stimulus actually made a difference?
It certainly has. Earlier we talked about the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. What we are finding, and I'm talking across FMCG and certainly across other fertilizer and chemicals and those industries, is that rural growth as a percentage has actually outstripped urban growth. Obviously the base is lower, but take a products like ours. Depending on the brand, and some of our large brands, 50% of our sales come from rural India. And NREGA has certainly helped in keeping that demand kind of spruced up. I think there is another very interesting thing that industry in India has done. I think we've all realized that the two keys to stimulating domestic demand and consumption are affordability and accessibility. So whether you're a shampoo or a biscuit or a television or a cell phone, you can get prepaid charges for 10 rupees. I mean, it's not a coincidence that there are 500 million cell phones in India. It's not a coincidence that if you look at price points, 5 rupee and 10 rupee price points across the board have a lot of consumption. But I think there's another truth hidden in that, and that's a very uncomfortable truth, and you just raised it. And that is one of inclusive growth. Because of the large base of population we have, even if we have a lot of people consuming a little, it adds up to a lot from a business point of view. But across the board, if you look at indices of per capita consumption, those are the lowest in India. In fact, across the board, if you look at food items, a country like Sri Lanka, which is literally right across sort of the ocean, has per capita consumption levels which are twice that of India. And I think this brings us to the point that Rajiv just raised, is if we're talking about inclusive growth, we cannot forget that in addition to economic indicators of development, there are things like health, there is access to healthcare facility, there is access to education or employability after education. And I think on a lot of those factors, we are far, far behind, and all of us have read the statistics. If you look at the Human Development Index and so on and so forth. I mean, as a country, in some of those areas, we rank lower than sub-Saharan Africa. To give you an example from my own industry, if you look at malnutrition in India, we are lower than sub-Saharan Africa. 40% of the world's malnourished children live in India. And 60% of school-going children in India are malnourished. And iron deficiency is the greatest form of malnourishment. So I think there are a number of other things that have to come together for growth to actually be comprehensive and inclusive.
Right. I just want to add one. There's a myth in India, it's gone on for a very long time, that India will achieve growth and inclusive growth sometimes despite the government. And that's just a myth that needs to be cast aside. The quicker we do it, the better. And I bring it to the point that while the industry can create growth and profits and whatever, unless the government improves the delivery of public goods and services in this country, you can surely not get inclusive growth, but very soon you will not get growth at all. A country where the provision of private security is one of the fastest rising sectors in the economy is not a place where people will come and invest. Because the law and order is a basic condition that you've got to have. So I think that's the basic condition for inclusiveness, which is a greater accountability for the government to deliver on its agenda of better goods, public goods and services availability in the economy, as Vinita pointed out herself. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Shankar? Increasingly the government is back in fashion across the world, not only in delivery of public goods, but in regions that were not considered the normal activity of the government. Country after country wants the government to play an activist role in getting things back in shape.
Well, I think I want to keep my intervention shorter. We need to hear from the floor, so to speak. So one thought, one area where I think government is still intrusive and to the detriment of our economic development, and it ties up with what Rajiv said about the importance of employment-intensive growth as the key, if you like, conveyor belt for inclusiveness. And that area, I say it without any great political hope, is labor reforms. We are a country, let's compare India to any other significant Asian country, where the proportion of the labor force which is in factory employment, decent factory employment as opposed to 5 people workshops, is abysmally low. And that's really where the most enduring middle class that can come in a development process. And the reason we have that situation, one important reason, there are many reasons, is that no sensible businesswoman or man, Vinita can correct me, really wants to have units where you're above 100 people on your actual books employed. So then you come under these labor laws, which are essentially very rigid and don't allow you to handle flexibility of a normal kind. The net result of labor legislation, which is there supposedly to protect labor, is exactly the opposite, which is highly anti-employment. And until we have the political guts to reform that, I think we do ourselves a huge damage.
What emerges from the discussion clearly is that, at least for India, what will make us insulate us from a global crisis and enable us to withstand the crisis when it happens is our own internal strength. Whether it is building physical infrastructure or creating processes which will allow government expenditure on social sector to actually do what they're supposed to do, or inclusive growth which will allow people to raise their income levels and become participants in the market economy. The whole range of things that we do internally to strengthen the size of the market and improve our productivity is actually what will actually help us withstand a global crisis as well. In addition, we can perhaps take credit for giving some lessons in monetary management, which now have been broadly accepted by the world at large. Asset price inflation now, everybody recognizes, including in the US Fed, is something that has to be taken into account when you look at inflation and when you plan your monetary policy. And we will play our role in the G20 deliberations in various coordination fora around the world in getting policy aligned across countries. But the basic problem remains ultimately politics. When you talk about government getting its delivery right, it is actually a shorthand euphemism for saying get the politics right. Ultimately, it's not the government itself that is actually at fault. It is the political systems you have built up, the absence of an institutional form of financing politics, which allows various illegal ways of money getting to the political system, which is creating all the tensions that we talked about. So this again is something that the Aspen Institute and various other fora will have to take up seriously. With this, we come to the end of the session. The organizers inform me there is a reception for all participants outside at the Shah Jahan Hall. Everybody is welcome. Thank you.